welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, Rishi Sunak has announced new legislation to exonerate wrongly convicted post office managers following the worst miscarriages of justice in British history. Our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey will soon be joining me with the latest developments from the Horizon scandal. And ahead of next week's World Economic Forum annual gathering at the plush Swiss ski resort Davos, the group have published their Global Risks Report for the year, naming AI-led fake news as the biggest threat to humanity. Dr. Anino Emua, founder of 100 Women at Davos, will be joining me from Lagos to share more insights about what other topics are likely to make headlines at the meeting. Then later, a decade of funding cuts to youth services in England has now reached more than £1 billion and is being cited as one of the reasons for record high knife crime across England's inner cities. Actor and director Femi Oyeniran will be joining me here in the studio to discuss Idris Elba's new campaign calling for a ban on machetes and zombie knives. But first, let's begin the show by taking a look at what's been trending on social media platforms this week, and we begin with LinkedIn. In this post, investor Bite Oduneye heaps plenty of praise on the fintech firm Kuda. Since its launch in the summer of 2019, the digital bank has acquired 7 million customers and processed an impressive 55.8 trillion naira in transactions. Oduneye goes on to celebrate CEO Babs Ogundeyi and talks about the firm's plans to intensify its focus on innovative cashless features. And on X, after reporting an 8% dip in sales to just more than $500 million in the 6 months through to September, the luxury Italian brand Versace announces the launch of its latest collection made in partnership with the money agency. The group also announced a revamp to its leadership team earlier this week in a bid to claw back dwindling revenues. Then this on Facebook from the Vietnamese media group VN Express International. According to this report, Zhang Zhetian, often labelled as China's youngest female billionaire by media sources, reportedly possesses a fortune of 60 billion yuan, the equivalent of $8.4 billion at just 31 years old. In 2015, Zhang married Liu Qiangdong, the 51-year-old chairman of JD.com, which is a major Chinese e-commerce platform. As of 2023, Forbes lists Liu's net worth at $4.9 billion. Since their marriage, Zhang has reportedly held several roles at JD. Now to a story that has dominated headlines in the UK following a gripping TV series called Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which began airing on television in the UK on New Year's Day. The show dramatises the fate of hundreds of people who ran branches of the post office across Britain and who were wrongly accused of theft after a faulty IT system called Horizon created false shortfalls in their accounting. Between 1999 and 2015, these post office branch managers were pursued relentlessly in the courts by the post office for financial losses that never occurred. Some were jailed, most were driven into financial hardship, many suffered mental health issues, and some even took their own lives. Under pressure, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Wednesday promised a new law to exonerate and compensate all known victims. This is a sweeping intervention that aims to finally bring justice after years of glacial progress. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has tried his best this week to try and right some of the wrongs in what has been described as Britain's biggest miscarriage of justice. How did this go so horribly wrong?
Yeah, and this is one of the few times, I think, where there's kind of consensus across the political divide. We're not sitting here talking about how Rishi Sunak's had a tough week or Sir Keir Starmer's had a tough week. This is kind of united everyone within politics. There's occasional...
And the public.
Yeah, occasional bit of sort of mudslinging, but it's generally sort of deemed to be one of these incidents where a huge organisation, like we talk about the BBC or other massive sort of places with thousands of staff, where something's happened and institutionally something's gone wrong. And this time it's the post office. And so, yeah, across politics, everyone's sort of singing from the same hymn sheet. So for people who don't know, this has been made aware of again by an ITV drama, a TV drama, which was very hard-hitting, very emotional. And it goes back 35 years or 28 years to 1999, which is when it started. And yet there still hasn't been justice for these over 700 postmasters and mistresses who worked in local jobs and were the sort of heart of the community. And the Post Office brought in this software system called Horizon, and suddenly accounting things started to crop up, and it looked like some of these postmasters and postmistresses were stealing from the Post Office.
People went to jail.
And people went to jail, and people committed suicide, and it tore apart families, because for years the Post Office denied that there was any problem with the software. They said this is the postmasters and postmistresses stealing. So made aware again by this documentary. Or this film. There have been previous about it, because of course it's been going on for 28 years now. So 736 postmasters and sub-postmistresses, that's on average once a week, were jailed based on the information from this computer system called Horizon. Horizon was run by Fujitsu, which is a Japanese company. And it's only now we're trying to unravel and see what's happened. So yeah, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak coming out and saying everyone's going to be exonerated. Everyone that was accused of this is.
And that's been a headache legally, isn't it? People are saying if it's just a blanket, because sadly some people could have been stealing, or is that not an important part of the story?
Well, I think that, you might be right there, but I think what we've seen is that if you're a postmaster or a postmistress and you're, if you want to be thieving, that's probably not the way you want to do it. You probably want to go and do something slightly bigger. So what's probably the case is 99% of these people are completely innocent. And it's just much easier, isn't it? And in a PR sense, just to do it. Yes. And they're also going to be compensated. So he says 555 people who brought a group lawsuit will be offered an upfront payment of £75,000. The reason that's a good move as well is that this has been going on since, well, for many years now. People have been trying to get compensation, and because the process in this country moves so slowly, because we've got such a big legal framework around stuff like this, it looks really, really bad that you've got people who have been lost many thousands of pounds not being compensated yet. So he's trying to obviously speed this up. And there's a few things that, a few politicians that were sort of in charge at the time, and people are sort of finger pointing.
Ed Davey, head of the Liberal Democrats.
I think there's some kind of obviously questions to be answered, and people want to not only to get justice to be vindicated, but also and compensated, but they also want to see the people that kind of caused this. They want to see some kind of accountability for that. The problem with that is it's obviously many, many years ago, and the cover-up is always bigger than the crime. These people will be finger-pointing at other people, and it's all very sort of murky what's happened. But it's one of these sort of tragic things that we get in this country every now and then, because we do have big institutions that are set in their ways, that have been happening for, going about their ways for many, many decades. It's quite hard to then unravel that and see what's happened. Great that this documentary's come out that's sort of sparked interest in it again, but we've seen it with lots of different things. We've seen it with the Windrush scandal. Grenfell. These kind of things happen where you've got quite a big, powerful organisation at the centre of it that are covering up things that they've done, and it takes many decades to sort of come out into the open, and then trying to go back through everything, it's really, really difficult. But like I said at the start, this is something that really, Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are very much on the same page with this, and they just want to see justice, I think, for people. And what's incredible is that this Horizon IT system is still in use today. It's still faulty and it's still in use, and the Post Office is still paying them millions of pounds.
It's just opened up a can of worms, hasn't it? But hopefully justice, however late, will be served for those victims. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Let's change gears now. The plush Swiss ski resort Davos will welcome global leaders for the World Economic Forum next week, with the event focused on rebuilding trust. Discussions will span global security, job creation, climate initiatives and AI development, with leaders striving for impactful united resolutions. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, French President Emmanuel Macron and key Middle East leaders are all slated to attend, alongside my next guest, Dr. Anino Emewa, who is the founder of 100 Women at Davos. Dr. Emewa joins me now from Lagos. Dr. Anino Emuwa, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. I do feel extra lucky and fortunate because I have been trying to get you on the show for several months now. You are an incredibly busy woman, and you're going to, of course, be incredibly busy next week because the 54th annual WEF meeting kicks off in Davos. According to President Borge Brende, the meeting is taking place against the world's most complicated geopolitical backdrop to date. I think AI is one of the biggest risks. But what exactly does he mean?
First of all, thank you, Juliana, for having me on your program today. Delighted to be here. Yes, it is very complicated. Well, just a little bit of background. There are probably around over 100 armed conflicts around the world. But in particular, what's happening in Israel and Gaza, as well as what's happening in the Ukraine, concerns the world globally. And that is because a lot of the armed conflicts, whilst they are all bloody, tend to be restricted within certain geographies. But these are the ones that have repercussions all around the world. And therefore, they are of concern to everybody. AI is a huge risk. And it's an opportunity, but there's also a risk in terms of misinformation, for example, and in terms of ethics. So whilst it gives us this amazing opportunity, there's also an issue there with AI. So we need to know how do we regulate it so we get the best out of it without also compromising the amazing abilities it gives us as a world, in the world.
No, absolutely. And I know, of course, as we said, artificial intelligence, we've just started having a discussion really about the threat of it. I know that's going to dominate lots of the discourse next week, including the discourse that you are going to be convening. Because, of course, as I said to the viewers, you are the founder of 100 Women at Davos. I know that you have a very large network of very influential women, not just African women, women from across the world, particularly at the C-suite level. Talk to me, Doctor, about why that group exists. What is its genesis? And what are you going to be getting up to next week?
Well, the genesis is quite simple. I had the opportunity many years ago of attending the World Economic Forum, and it became immediately apparent that there weren't enough women. Now, whilst in terms of the proportion of leadership, women in leadership is actually quite low, but when you have a gathering, it's perfectly possible to gather enough women. And the reason why we created this group originally was to give women a space in which that they can gather together, because it's extremely lonely at the top. What I found in my personal experience was that the voice of female leaders, right, tended to be lost in terms of the proportion and the low numbers of women that are there. So that actually gives women the ability to have a voice within what's happening in Davos. What it is we do, for example, is we make sure and we help to put women on panels. WEF is there, it's huge, but what is happening in Davos outside WEF is also, in terms of numbers, it's even bigger as well. So make sure we have representation of women within panels, within discussions, a lot of closed-door meetings that people are not aware of, and to make sure that women are involved in global decision-making. For us, what are we doing? We have various events, one for women themselves. So we kick off with our amazing dinner with over 110 C-suite women. We have 90% of our women are C-suite. Half of them are actually CEO, president, founder, or co-founder level. And we have amazing guest speakers who will be addressing us. And that gives women a good start to Davos. Women work well in business, in communities, simply because they are really in the minority, and it gives them the power and the force and the energy to basically achieve what it is they set out to do in Davos. There's a lot of information sharing, and I think that because we are now recognized that organizations, companies, events reach out to us, asking for speakers, asking for involvement, asking our women to actually contribute and be participants. Many of the big global names we are involved with in Davos.
It's really interesting listening to all of your insights and expertise. Dr. Anino Emuwa, founder of 100 Women at Davos, obviously based in Paris, but joining us from Lagos, Nigeria today. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah.
In a moment, I'll be speaking with actor and director Femi Oyeniran. But until then, here's a breakdown of some of the biggest business news stories of the week. Zimbabwe's dollar started the new year on the back foot, plunging over 40% on the black market as high demand for foreign exchange continues to outstrip supply. On Monday, the currency was changing hands at 10,900 Zimbabwean dollars per the US dollar, according to ZimPriceCheck.com, a website that monitors official and unofficial exchange rates. This rate is significantly lower than the official exchange rate of 6,467 Zimbabwean dollars per US dollar. The country has been struggling to stabilise its currency since its return into circulation in 2019. That's led citizens to favour the US dollar over its local counterpart to pay for everything ranging from food to medicines. The manufacturing giant Danone is cutting the prices for most of its baby formula products. Last month, the UK's Competition and Markets Authority said formula prices had increased by a quarter over the past 2 years. 3 ranges of Aptamil will be reduced at stores from next week. In a statement, Danone said it recognised the challenges faced by parents due to inflation. Alaska Airlines and United Airlines have cancelled hundreds of flights that were scheduled over the next few days as American regulators continue to investigate the incident in which a door blew out on a Boeing 737 MAX 9 jetliner mid-flight. The president of Boeing, Dave Calhoun, has admitted the plane maker was at fault. Alaska Airlines and United said on Monday they had found loose parts on multiple grounded aircraft, raising new concerns among industry experts about how Boeing's best-selling jet family is manufactured. Now to my final topic. Actor and musician Idris Elba is calling for an immediate ban on machetes and so-called zombie knives as he backs a new campaign to fight knife crime. The Lufa star is also lobbying for more funding for youth services in an effort to tackle youth violence across the UK. In just 10 years, over £1 billion worth of government cuts. In August last year, the Home Office promised that tougher measures against machetes and zombie-style knives would be introduced, but progress in passing the new legislation through Parliament has been slow, and several high-profile incidents have occurred, including last year's killing of 15-year-old schoolgirl Eliane Andam in South London. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by actor and director Femi Oyeniran, who started his career in the cult classic Kidulthood. Femi Oyeniran, it is an absolute pleasure to have you in the Channel's Business Global studio.
Good to be here.
I can't believe I've been here in the studio for 5 years. It's the first time you're coming in.
It's your fault.
It's your fault because you're too busy. You know, check your IMD. It's not easy getting a movie star into the studio, but I've got to because I kind of feel like it's a duty for me to keep our viewers, particularly those back home, aware of what's happening to some of our youths on the streets of England's biggest cities. Idris Elba, one of your colleagues, this week launched the Don't Stop Your Future campaign, basically asking for an immediate ban on, goodness, I can't even believe I'm saying it, machetes, yes, and zombie knives that are plaguing the streets. Can you just give us an idea of what exactly is happening to some young boys and girls, sadly?
I think, unfortunately, a lot of young people are getting involved in violent crime and, sometimes ending up stabbing each other. And I think, unfortunately, in working class communities, this is most prominent. And unfortunately, as Nigerians, we're represented in this group because en masse, lots of Nigerians have, sort of migrated.
There's many of us.
Yeah, and there's many of us everywhere.
Yeah.
And we're represented in every strata of society, almost across the West. So unfortunately, that has led to, this campaign by Idris Elba, which Idris Elba should be campaigning for kids to get into media and stuff like that, but actually you have to tackle these issues before they're even allowed to dream.
Yeah. Do you think it's getting worse? Because are you an 80s guy? You're an 80s?
I'm 80s.
You're 80s, so of course I know you... Late 80s. We are age mates. And of course we grew up at a time where grime music, not Afrobeats, but grime, certainly, and drill was just kind of starting off.
Yeah.
Certainly your peers were the pioneers of
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of these guys are still my friends today.
Was it bad then? Is it the same?
I think it was bad then. I think what we do have now is a lot of publicity on it, and what we do have now is social media, and so a lot of the sort of the street beefs that these young people are having is not just playing out on a localized level. It's playing out on social media. It's going onto Snapchat. It's going, it's playing out with people calling each other out across these platforms. And so ultimately, I think it's always been there, and it's now being magnified by, everyone has their own individual broadcast network through social media.
Yeah. So do you think, music and, content does have a role to play? Because, of course, I know millions of our viewers will recognise you from the classic adulthood, adulthood, and otherhood. Of course, you've got The Intent 1 and 2, both streaming on Netflix. Your movies do kind of promote gang violence.
I mean, they portray it. They don't promote it.
Okay.
I think it's completely different things. I think it's important that we shine a light on these issues. Like, I recently released another film called Trapping, which looks at inner city drug gangs that take young people to the countryside to sell drugs for them. And that idea, and so for me, that's called County Lines here, but for me, the idea is not to promote it and tell young people to do it, is to actually present the facts as they are, and people can make of that information what they will. And so for me, I think it's important to tell these stories, because if we don't, who will?
Yeah, exactly. When I was doing some research in this interview, I was shocked, actually, that, the calculation suggests £1 billion has been cut, just removed from funding in youth centres in England in the past decade. Surely that's contributing to this.
No, absolutely. I think I'm a strong believer in youth clubs, and if you look at the early pioneers of grime music, people like Dizzy Rascal, he started making music in his local youth club in Bow. And so I think it's important, and Hinchy Strider, Rough Squad, all these people that, pioneered this music, some of them West African heritage, they had somewhere to go, and they were doing it from their local community, their sort of their living room outside of their living room, so to speak. And that's been taken away. And so that has left a void for teenagers, where that void has been replaced by the online space. And when they want to express themselves outside of the online space, they've got nowhere to go. And that's the massive change to where, like you were saying, to when we were growing up. When we were growing up, we had lots of spaces, and there was a lot of funding for youth provisions.
Just finally on this topic, what would you say, or what advice would you give to anyone who's watching? Femi, could be their brother or their sister or their child. They're not as streetwise as some of us parents, and they are really worried because they are struggling to communicate with them. How can you pull them out of that vicious?
I think the main thing is to remain consistent and to keep communicating to them, and to engage with them on the causes of these issues, and also try to engage them with other ideas, other things. For me, I was always into acting. I just was not into that life. I was quite academic at the same time. However, I think young people need to be engaged with things. If they don't get busy doing sports or other activities or gaining other skills, they'll get busy getting up to no good. So I think it's important that you engage, not to fixate on on the negative, but to present them with positive options of what they can do with their time.
You've got to come back.
I'm here.
You've got to come back, because I think a lot of people need our help, and we've got to use our platforms.
Absolutely.
In a way to help, not just those climb, but some just to get on the ladder and off the streets.
Absolutely.
They need all the mentors that they can get. Femi Oyeniran, actor, director, writer, thought leader, and everything above. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week in Davos for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.